Greer went on to earn a medical degree and raise a family. He continued to study consciousness and contact. And decades later, it seems he would be the doctor called upon first to examine the very unusual body.
This came to us in the last couple of years, and there's a man who runs an institute in another country that I cannot talk about. But he came into possession of a little creature. It is humanoid. It does not look human.
We have acquired an EBE, an extraterrestrial biological entity. We're flying over to Europe soon to take some tissue samples and do some DNA testing.
This was found in the Atacama Desert. We don't know how it came about. Here's the great view of the face and cheekbone, very complex. Now there is a fracture here, and behind this right ear is caved in, and that's how this ET being was killed.
We have the best scientists in the US from Stanford that are going to be doing the testing itself to see what this really is, and also to rule out what it's not.
The initial reaction that I had is the same reaction that many of my colleagues here at Stanford and elsewhere have had when I've shown them, is that, wow, what is this? The question is important enough in at least two ways. The primary reason is that there's a lot of claims about specimens and claims about aliens. And of course there's a lot of ridicule associated with that. So one of the best things that we should be doing, of course, then is bringing the best scientific techniques to bear. The techniques are available, the techniques are cheap, the answers are nearly absolute, so let's do it. And it's so exciting because it's not just... In setting up for this, I'm going to be giving Steve not only the tubes that this should be going into, but I'm also going to be sending across the microscope that I feel they should be using to do the analysis with. Before we even get started with some of the analysis, I think it's going to be important to rule out some of the obvious critiques that could come up. And one of those critiques is that this is a syndrome or a mutation. This is a bone dysplasia. And luckily, here at Stanford, we happen to have literally the world's expert, the man who wrote the book on bone dysplasias and syndromes, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Ralph Lockman, who has kindly agreed to look at the specimen, both the pictures as well as the CT scans and the x-rays, to help determine whether or not it's anything that he's ever seen before. I think that a dozen or even 15 years ago, answering the question of what is this would really not have been possible because the kinds of technologies were not available as are available today. But really the DNA tells the story, and because we have the computational techniques, that allows us to determine in very short order whether in fact this is human. So this will be basically an absolute level of proof as to what this actually is.
The problem is not proving that UFOs exist. It's when you begin to expose the energy and propulsion systems behind how they're getting here. You're talking about unveiling an entirely new science that would replace oil, gas, coal, nuclear power, public utilities. And this is the $600 trillion problem.
The patent office, after they fired me, I had to wait 6 years before I got rehired. Everybody at the office was avoiding the case. But when they finally did, the arbitrator wrote an 85-page report on how the media had caused my dismissal. So I only got a 30-day suspension out of the whole thing, which was taken out of the tiny little bit of 6-year back pay. So that was great. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it made it all worth it, so to speak, because that's how we were able to open the offices and stuff.
It was very comfortable. No feeling of being shocked or anything else, just a good feeling, comfortable.
What scientists need to do, and normal people need to do, is they need to look at the hardcore evidence, decide that, oh my gosh, ETs are real, and then get over that. And if that's the case, then you can start extrapolating, because they're getting here, which means they have solved the physics problem, if you will.
That's an actual photograph that Mark Whitford took, a friend of mine. And you see the stars in the background. So this is a fixed camera. The craft was a triangular craft moving away from him, and all of a sudden it makes a right angle turn. Apparently it has what I would describe as inertial shielding. It's the only way something can make a right angle turn without having everybody killed inside of the craft.
Though we experience inertial forces every day, their origins remain a mystery. However, there are theories that point to interactions between objects with mass and a quantum energy field.
Inertia is due to the zero-point energy interaction. So you're interacting with a charged matrix, which is a zero-point field. If you try to change that, then you get a reaction force. There must be an interference shield of electromagnetic nature that would stop that interaction with the zero-point field. And you can suspect that UFOs have already figured this out, because they wouldn't be flying around and still have inhabitants.
New energy scientists today are attempting to find new ways to define the relationship between electricity, gravity, magnetism, and propulsion. But as history has shown, change does not always come easy.
It's like Newton. Why is that apple falling? Nobody ever asked that question before or even tried to come up with an answer. And Newton comes up with something called Newton bucket, or Newton's problem. The only guy that solves it 300 years later is Einstein. So, you know, how smart can we be? If you look at everything normal within the conventional wisdom, you're not going to learn anything new.
My name is Morgan Boardman. I am the Chief Financial Officer of Morningstar Applied Physics. My business partners are Paul Murad and Dr. John Brandenburg.
What we're doing, like I said earlier, is we're using a magnetic field that's rotating about the axis with the hope of generating a magnetic vortex.
In essence, we are trying to start a civilian advanced research projects agency.
Okay, all right, so basically we have four options. Option one is a retarded potential. Option two is a lagging image, right?
Yeah.
Option three is pointing vector as a motive for propulsion, or how that may be what's happening, right?
Yeah.
And that's actually taking angular momentum and changing it into linear momentum if it's working the way we want it to, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then the fourth one. The fourth one is that we are somehow either generating and or absorbing gravity waves.
You got it.
Do we accept Einstein's viewpoint that thou shalt not go faster than the speed of light? If you look at a black hole, the comment is the gravity is so strong that nothing leaves. But it does have something that leaves the black hole, and that is gravity. So does that imply that gravity moves faster than the speed of light? Could be.
Gravity is another one of those seemingly self-evident forces that has raised a number of questions. How does it really work? How can we use it to our advantage? In the mid-1920s, T. Townsend Brown discovered that electric charge and gravitational mass are coupled, and that by building devices that harness these interactive forces, we could create advanced propulsion. At about the same time, Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison won the Nobel Prize in physics, but both refused it. Tesla was at the end of a long career of inventing. He had advanced technology in the fields of X-ray, radio waves, internal combustion, and, of course, atmospheric electricity. When everything was said and done, he had earned 112 U.S. patents. He proved that electricity can travel wirelessly in the air, and ultimately died penniless. However, his work did influence many others, most notably Lester Hendershot and Dr. T. Henry Moray. Hendershot invented a magnetronic generator to energize an impossible flight, if fueled by gas, that took Charles Lindbergh and the Spirit of St. Louis from New York to Paris. Dr. T. Henry Moray developed the Moray valve. a device for extracting radiant energy from the zero-point field, and demonstrated this device hundreds of times and had dozens of signed affidavits supporting his science. Yet in the end, even these two notable scientists were ignored and bullied. Dr. Moray's device was hammered down and broken into pieces by a competitor, and before he could finish reconstruction, he passed away of natural causes. Hendershot fled to Mexico to continue work, but was found dead at 61 years of age, attributed to suicide.
There's all kinds of skullduggery that happened there. I don't think T. Henry Moray ever got a decent chance to ever do anything with that. There is absolutely no question that T. Henry Moray had a system that produced about 50 kilowatts out of a 55-pound box. The conventional electrodynamics model does not allow this to happen. In other words, it doesn't allow you to extract excess energy from the vacuum and use that to power your load. It costs just as much to restore it as was used to destroy it. So we got to put in more than we can ever get out in a load with such a squirrely circuit. And that's the only kind of circuit we've used in power systems since day one. We're still building them. We're still making power systems that deliberately kill them. So we pay the power company to have a giant wrestling match inside his generator and lose.
In the 1950s, there were some very provocative articles saying that, oh, electrogravitics is the best thing since sliced bread, how all the aviation companies are now backing electrogravitics, they're all doing experiments on it. Well, within a couple of years, there was no news at all.
Once they figured out that they could really control gravity, 1954, it all went black.
Do you think the boys in the black projects have solved that problem? Because it sure sounds like it from what the witnesses have told me.
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. Sorry, but I can't even think about it. I see so many things in my life, it's just hard to say.
A local inventor has discovered a way, hear this, to use water to run your car.
What Stan shared with me was interesting.
In order to run this engine off of water, we've also had to learn the ability to adjust the burn rate of hydrogen to co-equal the fossil fuels.
So he applies for a patent, and then he gets a call from actually a visitation by two guys from the Pentagon.
The Pentagon flew a lieutenant colonel in last week to look at Meyer's invention. There's talk of possibly using it in the Star Wars defense program and to run Army tanks.
But he asked that this become a public patent so that the civilians could benefit from it. And he indicated that if we don't do that, overseas people will.
In 1996, Meyer was sued by his investors, who claimed the device was not revolutionary, despite verification of the unique voltage intensifier circuit by the U.S. Patent Office. Meyer was brought to trial, but key evidence was not allowed. His oral testimony was not even recorded due to an audio recorder malfunction, and the judge recessed early for vacation. Later, Meyer made an appeal but was denied. He was found guilty of fraud and ordered to repay his investors, putting an immediate dent on the idea of funding new technology. On March 20th, 1998, Stanley joined his brother and two NATO officials for a dinner meeting. Stan took a sip of cranberry juice, grabbed his neck, ran out of the restaurant, and fell to the ground, saying, "They poisoned me."
He fell down after eating at a restaurant nearby where he lived, fell down the parking lot, said, "I've been poisoned," collapsed.
And that's on the police report?
Yeah.
The police report confirms his words. The cause of death was written to be an aneurysm, though he left behind just enough materials for others to piece together his process. The full secrets of his device died with him.
So from this, I began to do more work with the administration, various people, friends of the president, the Rockefeller family. Lawrence was the white hat in that crowd who wanted us to bring this information out, actually hosted us at the Rockefeller Ranch in the Tetons. And one night he pulled me out on the deck and he said, "Well, you know, we really need you to do this." I said, Lawrence, you're old, you're rich, and you're a Rockefeller. What do you want me to do? I'm just a country doctor banging around in an ER in North Carolina. He says, no, we want you to do this. I went, okay. So I'm the throwaway guy. I'm the guy you can throw away because my life doesn't matter.
We are back in Rachel, Nevada with our first two distinguished guests. Stephen Greer is a North Carolina doctor. He does a lot more than watch the skies. He fires off messages, and he says that someone or something is responding. Dr. Greer is looking for close encounters of the fifth kind. What, at this minute, do you believe?
Our assessment at this point is that there is at least one extraterrestrial civilization which has managed to make its way to our corner of the universe. And number two, that there's no evidence at all that they have hostile intentions towards this planet. And number three, that the priority at this point must be trying to establish some sort of a liaison to them, some sort of a diplomatic liaison to them, and that's what we're working on.
Is there a continued cover-up? Yes. Do those at the highest levels of government agencies know that there's a cover-up? Not necessarily.
Officer X, a high-ranking military veteran, joined forces with Dr. Greer in order to use his military and government influence to gain access to high-level officials.
I was able to arrange for a CSETI briefing to the then Vice Director for Intelligence for the Joint Staff, Admiral Tom Wilson, the same person who had been at Atlantic Command with me. At that meeting was Steve, Apollo 14 astronaut Ed Mitchell, Brigadier General retired Steve Lovkin, Siri Adamaic, Steve's right arm.
Well, Dr. Greer did indeed mount an initiative and did go to Washington, did speak with high-level government people. I attended and helped him with that. We briefed certain members of Congress, some of their staff, some of the people from the White House. We talked with people in the Pentagon. It led me to the belief that people in high-level government have very, very little, if any, information, valid information.
One of the most important of all the meetings was with CIA Director R. James Woolsey.
Here I fly up to Washington. The cover story was a dinner party. One of the things that I found was that this CIA director wasn't lying when he communicated to us that he had not had access to these projects. He was shaken to his core. We met for not 20 minutes, almost 3 hours. And by the end of it, I handed him, my hands were shaking, I handed him this document, and it was a position paper recommending executive orders and the things the Clinton administration and he needed to do to get control of this mess. And he looked at it, and he looked at me. He says, yes, he says, but how do we disclose that which we have no access to? And I almost wept. I went, what?
Dr. Greer approached many D.C. officials in an attempt to gain an audience. One of the people who took him seriously was former CIA Director Bill Colby.
If there's truth in it, there can be a danger in that situation. We've seen that happen in other cases. I said, you have to consider the possibility of some danger to not only your reputation, but to your person. I mean, people do react rather violently to some kinds of charges, or particularly if they're true.
Now, you know, I'm a 30-some-year-old doctor with 4 kids, a golden retriever, and a house in North Carolina. So I'm going, this is down the rabbit hole fast. But that is the situation, my friends, when you're dealing with secrecy that is criminal and illegal.
In 1997, in an effort to push his message deeper into Congress and the White House, Greer headed to Phoenix to prepare a video with his best evidence to show in Washington, D.C. While he was in the editing room, the biggest UFO witnessed event in history was about to happen.
On March 13th, 1997,
When the Hale-Bopp comet was very clear in the northwest sky, thousands of people were outside trying to get a glimpse of it when they also caught a glimpse. These orbs, giant orbs, equidistant in a V formation of 1 mile to 2 mile wide in some very credible reports.
And that's the particular area where these phenomena keep popping up from my vantage point. The Native Americans living in the basin between South Mountain and the Estrellas have told me that not only were they looking up at the Phoenix Lights during the mass sighting, but they've been looking up at them for centuries.
I live in a community called Loop, northeast of Flagstaff, on the Navajo Indian Reservation. We'll have to go back in time one day before. We saw 6 to 7 lights that were circling along the horizon. The entire street came out. It was almost like a block party. Everybody turned off their lights, everybody sat in their front yards, and everybody watched this unusual light show.
I squeezed down the best of what I found and finally came forward in 2004 with the Phoenix Lights, a skeptic's discovery that we are not alone.
10,000 people approximately witnessed this, one of the largest experiences of this sort ever recorded.
The Phoenix Lights phenomenon didn't seem to be falsifiable in any way. It was being validated by most everybody that saw it.
The ultimate, shall we say, insult was the governor of the state of Arizona, Fife Symington, finally calling a news conference saying that he has finally got the answer to the Phoenix Lights, and he introduces some staff member dressed up as a space alien.
People got very angry because here is the top elected official of the state making fun of what I estimate to be close to probably 10,000 people saw this.
Under the watchful eye of the public, Symington retracted his statement.
If you had been here 10 years ago and standing out here and looking up there at the lights and the view, you would have been astounded. You would have been amazed.
The so-called Phoenix Lights were seen by many people in 1997. Skeptics say they were military aircraft or flares, but not the former governor.
It was probably some form of an alien spacecraft.
On our way to Barcelona to retrieve the evidence.
Dr. Bravo.
Hi, baby.
Are you ready for the trip?
I'm ready for the trip. I'm so excited. We're going to do some very wonderful work, and I can't wait to get the results.
Upon arriving in Spain to look at the being for the very first time, I was kind of skeptical.
It was definitely a game changer for my thought process to actually see it in person than to see it on film.